nestled in the heart of Maplewood, Ohio. Ethan's place sat like a comforting beacon among the towering city buildings. The diner, with its bright neon sign and cheery red booths, was more than just a place to grab a meal. It was a sanctuary. For years, it had been a refuge for locals and strangers alike, drawn in by the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of clinking silverware. The man behind the counter, Ethan Carter, had dedicated his life to making the diner a haven where everyone felt welcome. Ethan, 42, had inherited the diner from his father, who had opened it as a modest food stand decades ago. Over the years, Ethan had expanded it into a full-fledged establishment, but life hadn't been kind to him lately. His father's sudden passing 5 years ago left him struggling to balance the business and his own grief. Financial troubles piled up, the building needed repairs, and Ethan often worked long hours just to keep the diner afloat. Still, his love for cooking and his determination to honor his father's legacy kept him going. On a particularly cold winter evening, the city streets outside were blanketed in frost, and the sidewalks sparkled with patches of ice. Inside Ethan's place, the warmth of the diner was a sharp contrast to the biting chill outside. The booths were filled with familiar faces, regulars seeking solace in a warm meal and conversation. Ethan stood behind the counter, flipping pancakes for a family seated near the window, the glow of the kitchen light reflecting in his tired but kind eyes. Just as Ethan set down another plate of bacon and eggs, the bell above the door jingled. He looked up, expecting to see one of the usual customers. Instead, a man stepped inside, and for a brief moment, the hum of the diner seemed to quiet. The man's clothes were worn, his jacket frayed at the edges. His face, marked by lines of hardship, was pale from the cold. He hesitated in the doorway, his posture unsure, as though he were intruding on a space he didn't belong. "Come on in," Ethan called out, his voice carrying the warmth of someone who had seen his fair share of weary travelers. "It's freezing out there. Grab a seat anywhere." The man nodded faintly and shuffled toward the corner booth, the farthest from the other patrons. His hands trembled slightly as he rested them on the table. Ethan watched him for a moment, his instincts telling him there was more to the man's story than met the eye. Finishing up an order, he wiped his hands on his apron and approached the booth. "What can I get for you?" Ethan asked, his tone light but friendly. The man hesitated, his eyes darting toward the menu on the wall before settling on the tabletop. "I don't have any money," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "I just needed somewhere warm to sit for a while." Ethan's heart tightened. Over the years, he had seen countless people pass through his diner, each with their own struggles, but something about this man's quiet desperation struck a chord. Without hesitation, Ethan smiled and said, "Don't worry about it. I'll fix you something good." The man's eyes lifted, filled with a flicker of surprise and gratitude. Ethan returned to the kitchen, his mind already racing with what to prepare. He decided on something special, his mother's spaghetti and meatballs, a recipe that had always brought him comfort during tough times. As he cooked, memories of his mother, Margaret Carter, came flooding back. She had always believed in the power of kindness, often saying, "A warm meal can do more than fill a stomach. It can mend a heart." As the sauce simmered and the meatballs browned, Ethan thought about how life had a way of humbling everyone. He didn't know the man's story, but he knew what it felt like to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. When the meal was ready, he plated it carefully, adding a slice of garlic bread and a small side salad. Carrying the tray to the corner booth, Ethan set it down gently. "Here you go," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Eat up. It's on the house." The man stared at the plate for a moment, his expression a mix of disbelief and vulnerability. Slowly, he picked up his fork and took a bite. Then another. Ethan didn't linger, sensing that the man needed space. He returned to the counter, resuming his work, but keeping an eye on the corner booth. The man ate slowly, savoring each bite as though it were more than just food. It was a lifeline. About 30 minutes later, Ethan noticed the man had finished his meal. He stood up, nodding toward Ethan with a faint smile, and quietly left the diner without saying a word. As Ethan walked over to clear the table, He noticed something tucked under the empty plate, a folded napkin. Curious, he picked it up and unfolded it. Inside was a simple note written in shaky handwriting. You didn't just feed me today, you gave me hope. I used to be a chef, before life took everything from me. Your kindness reminded me that there's still good in the world. Thank you for seeing me as a person, not a burden. I won't forget this. Beneath the note was a crumpled $5 bill, likely all the man had. Ethan felt a lump in his throat as he read the words again. He had no idea what had led the man to his diner that night or the struggles he had faced. But the note spoke volumes. It wasn't just about the food. It was about the act of being seen and treated with dignity. Ethan returned to the counter, turning the napkin over in his hands. That night, as the diner emptied out and the last customer left, Ethan sat alone at the counter, staring at the handwritten note. The words resonated deeply, reminding him why he had kept the diner open despite the challenges. His mother's belief in kindness, passed down through the generations, had guided him without fail. And tonight, it had made a difference. The next morning, as the diner opened for breakfast, Ethan made a decision. He cleared a small section of the wall near the counter and hung a corkboard. Above it, he wrote in bold letters, "Pay it forward, leave a meal, share kindness." He explained the idea to his regulars as they came in, inviting them to contribute small amounts to cover meals for those in need. At first, the board remained sparse, with just a few notes pinned up, but slowly, the idea began to take root. Customers left meal credits, wrote messages of encouragement, and even shared their own stories of hardship and gratitude. By the end of the week, the board was covered with colorful notes, each one a testament to the ripple effect of kindness. Ethan couldn't have imagined the impact that one cold evening and a simple plate of spaghetti would have. The diner, once just a place to eat, was transforming into something much more, a symbol of hope and generosity in the heart of Maplewood. The Pay It Forward board at Ethan's place began to take on a life of its own. At first, Ethan wasn't sure how the idea would resonate with his customers. But within days, it became clear that something special was happening. Regular patrons, office workers, construction crews, and families started leaving contributions for meals, pinning notes of encouragement, and sharing stories of their own struggles. The messages ranged from simple, "You're not alone," notes to heartfelt letters about overcoming hardship and finding hope. Ethan couldn't believe how quickly the movement had grown. Each day, new notes appeared, and more people came to the diner, drawn by the sense of community the board had created. One day, as Ethan prepared a stack of pancakes, a young woman approached the counter. She looked nervous, clutching a small piece of paper in her hand. "I saw the board," she said softly, her voice trembling. I'm between jobs right now. Is it okay if I use one of the meal credits?" Ethan smiled warmly, wiping his hands on his apron. "Of course. That's what it's there for. Take a seat. I'll bring you something." As Ethan served her a warm plate of scrambled eggs and toast, he noticed tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I would have done today." Moments like these reminded Ethan why he had started the board. It wasn't just about the food. It was about creating a space where people felt seen and cared for. And with each new story, Ethan felt his own sense of purpose deepen. Weeks later, as the board continued to grow, the bell above the diner's door jingled one chilly afternoon. Ethan glanced up from the grill, his hands busy flipping a burger. A man entered, his posture confident but relaxed. His coat was new, his shoes polished, and his face carried a brightness that Ethan didn't immediately recognize. "Ethan," the man said, smiling as he approached the counter. "I'm not sure if you remember me." Ethan blinked, pausing his work. The voice was familiar, but it took him a moment to place it. Then it clicked. The man standing before him was the same person who had walked into his diner weeks ago, shivering in a tattered coat and desperate for warmth. "It's you," Ethan said, setting down his spatula. "I didn't expect to see you again. You look different." The man chuckled softly, sliding onto one of the stools. "I am different," he said, "and it's all because of you." Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" The man introduced himself as Ryan Blake. When I walked into your diner that night, I was at the lowest point in my life, he began. I'd lost everything, my business, my home, even my sense of self. I was ready to give up, but then you gave me that meal, and you didn't make me feel like I was a burden. That small act of kindness, it changed everything. Ethan listened intently as Ryan continued. He explained how that night had inspired him to reflect on his life and make a change. He had once been a successful businessman, running a tech company in a nearby city. But poor decisions, a failed marriage, and mounting pressure had led him to lose everything. For months, he had wandered, feeling lost and hopeless, until the night he walked into Ethan's diner. After I left here, Ryan said, I used that $5 to get a coffee and sit down to think. That's when it hit me. I needed to rebuild, not just for myself, but for others. I reached out to an old friend who believed in me, and we started a new venture, a tech startup focused on sustainability and giving back to the community. Ethan stared at Ryan, stunned. That's incredible. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Ryan replied. You already said everything that night. Your kindness reminded me that there's still good in the world. And now, I want to pay it forward in a bigger way. Ryan slid an envelope across the counter. I've made a donation to your Pay It Forward board, he said. It's enough to cover meals for a long time, and I'd like to help you renovate this place. Make it even more of a sanctuary for people in need. Ethan opened the envelope, his breath catching when he saw the check inside. The amount was more than he had ever expected, more than enough to fix the diner's aging equipment, repaint the walls, and expand the Pay It Forward initiative. Ryan, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't even know how to thank you. You already did, Ryan said simply. Now it's my turn. With Ryan's donation, Ethan's place underwent a transformation. The old corkboard was replaced with a dedicated Pay It Forward wall, complete with colorful notes and envelopes for meal credits. A cozy corner of the diner was converted into a small reading nook with donated books and board games for families to enjoy. The kitchen received much-needed upgrades, allowing Ethan to serve more people efficiently. News of the diner's mission spread throughout Maplewood. Local media picked up the story, and more people began visiting Ethan's place, not just for the food, but for the sense of community it offered. Regulars pitched in, helping to organize events like free holiday meals and job fairs for those in need. Ryan became a frequent visitor, often sitting at the counter with a cup of coffee and a warm smile. He had become part of the diner's extended family. His story a living testament to the power of kindness and second chances. As the months passed, the impact of Ethan's place rippled through the town. The Pay It Forward wall was always full, and Ethan began to see familiar faces returning, not as people in need, but as contributors, eager to give back. One day, a young man approached Ethan with a broad smile. I came here last winter when I had nowhere else to go, he said. That meal you gave me, it kept me going. Now, I've got a job and a place to live. I just wanted to say thank you and add this to the board. He pinned a $20 bill to the wall, a small but meaningful token of gratitude. Ethan's heart swelled with pride and humility. What had started as a simple act of kindness had grown into a movement, proving that even the smallest gestures could create lasting change. Months turned into a year, and Ethan's place became more than just a diner. It became the heart of Maplewood. The Pay It Forward wall overflowed with notes and donations. Strangers began paying for one another's meals. Neighbors supported each other, and the diner thrived as a hub of generosity and connection. Ethan Carter marveled at how far his small act of kindness had traveled, touching lives in ways he could never have imagined. One brisk autumn morning, as sunlight poured through the diner's large windows, the bell above the door jingled. Ethan, busy preparing omelets behind the counter, looked up to see Ryan Blake walk in, his familiar confident stride accompanied by a broad smile. Ethan, Ryan greeted warmly as he approached the counter. Good to see you, Ryan, Ethan replied, returning the smile. It's been a while. How's life treating you? Better than ever, Ryan said, sliding onto a stool. The startup's doing great. We've launched programs to provide tech training for underprivileged communities. It's been a whirlwind, but I wanted to stop by to share something. Ethan poured Ryan a cup of coffee. His curiosity piqued. What's on your mind? Ryan pulled a small envelope from his jacket and placed it on the counter. This, he said, pushing it toward Ethan, is the next chapter for Ethan's place. Ethan hesitated, his hands wiping nervously on his apron. Ryan, you've already done so much. The renovations, the donation. Ryan shook his head, cutting him off. This isn't just about the diner. It's about the movement you've started. People need places like this. Ethan, safe spaces where kindness isn't just an idea, but a way of life. That's why I want to help you expand. Ethan opened the envelope and stared at the check inside. The amount made his heart race. Ryan, he trailed off, his voice thick with emotion. It's enough to open 2 more locations. Ryan explained, one here in Ohio and one in the next state over. We'll recreate the Pay It Forward wall and bring this sense of community to even more people. Over the next few months, Ethan worked closely with Ryan and a team of volunteers to bring the plan to life. The second location opened in a neighboring town, modeled after the original Ethan's place. Complete with the Pay It Forward wall and co. Ethan traveled between the 2 diners, his days filled with work, but his heart brimming with purpose. He met people from all walks of life, single parents struggling to make ends meet, veterans looking for a fresh start, and students who just needed a warm meal and a quiet place to study. Each story added a new layer to the tapestry of kindness Ethan had unintentionally woven. The third location followed soon after, with Ryan providing guidance and resources to ensure its success. Local businesses began partnering with Ethan's place, offering discounts for those in need or donating supplies. The movement had become more than just a few diners. It was a network of people united by compassion. One chilly winter evening, as the original Ethan's place bustled with activity, Ethan stood behind the counter, watching the scene unfold. Families laughed over steaming plates of food. A group of teenagers pinned notes to the Pay It Forward wall, and a man in a construction uniform handed a meal voucher to a young mother holding her child. Ryan sat across from Ethan at the counter, sipping his coffee. You've built something incredible here, Ryan said, his voice filled with admiration. Ethan shook his head humbly. We built it together. I just made spaghetti for a stranger one night. You turned it into something much bigger. Ryan smiled. Don't sell yourself short. It was your heart that made this happen. You believed in people. Ethan looked around the diner, his eyes misting with gratitude. I guess I just wanted to create a place where no one feels invisible, where they know they matter. And you've done exactly that, Ryan said, more than you'll ever know. As the years passed, the Ethan's Place movement grew beyond Maplewood. Diners across the country adopted the Pay It Forward wall. Inspired by the original story, communities came together, united by the simple idea that a little kindness could go a long way. Ethan, who had once struggled to keep his father's diner afloat, became a quiet hero, a man who had reminded the world of the power of compassion. Ryan Blake continued to support the movement, using his resources to help expand its reach. But he often reminded people that the real credit belonged to Ethan and his unwavering belief in the goodness of humanity. One evening, after closing time, Ethan sat alone in the original diner. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the only sound. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded napkin, the same one Ryan had left that cold night so many years ago. He read the words again, though he had memorized them long ago. Ethan placed the napkin back in his pocket, a smile tugging at his lips. He had never set out to change the world, but by showing kindness to one person, he had done just that. As he turned off the lights and locked the door, Ethan knew that the story of Ethan's Place was far from over. The ripple effect of that single act of compassion would continue, touching lives in ways he might never see. And that was enough.